In nearby cells, Christopher Binns endured similar solitary confinement.
A couple of times I went on hunger strikes, I bronzed myself up, I threw shit at the screws, you know, and acts of frustration because they just sent me mad. You know, it got to a point literally where I had enough of their shit. It was just brain numbing, you know, where it was just trying to wear me down mentally, you know, just to break me down, to wear me down. And at the end of the day, I said, I've had enough. I've had enough of your shit, you're going to cop mine.
Prisoners are allowed closely supervised exercise. Association with other inmates is limited. When they are moved, they are always outnumbered by officers. No one-on-one contact between inmates and prison officers is allowed.
When you've got a small group of very manipulative inmates that are face-to-face with the same staff day in, day out for an extended period of time, familiarity can develop. And so in that sense, it's a corruption prevention strategy.
How conscious are you of attempts to, say, manipulate you and try to take advantage of you? Are there those sort of mind games that go on all the time?
On a daily basis, they try the sympathy act, or they will try the. I guess they see females as a softer touch, but I think in actual fact, females are more aware of being manipulated by male inmates than a male officer would be.
A three-stage privileges and sanctions program rewards and punishes behaviour. Access to phone calls, movement, association and property such as television sets is controlled from above.
I think their complaint is that this enables you to play God and engage in petty mind games. Does that happen?
I think it's a perception of theirs that it's mind games, or it allows us to play God. But that's not what it's about. It's about controlling their behaviour here, and it does that very well. There are very few incidents within the HRMU, and that's because of that program. It takes a long time to get to the top of that program and get the maximum privileges, and so there's a reluctance to slide back down.
Like to put your thumb on the reader for me, please, Mr. Walker?
Inmates are allowed one contact visit a week. They also have access to the official visitor. Jack Walker looks in on the Aboriginal prisoners, two of whom were moved here following their 2002 attack on prison officers.
They call it the harm you. Do you think it's a harmful environment?
Well, you know, it would be locked up, and but they get a little freedom in the place. You know, they can get their exercise at liberty of doing that. They got their own amenities like the TVs and other stuff in the jails, which they wouldn't get in outside if they hadn't had no money. We're talking about Aboriginals, of course. But you know, I think it's a great setup towards, you know, for the crime that these fellas done.
In its 4 years of operation, reports of attempted suicide and self-harm are few. But here, 4 years is a blink of the eye.
It is obviously an area of heightened confinement. Is this not corrosive to psychological health?
I think you'll find a lot of opinion and speculation about that issue, but in terms of evidence that long-term incarceration or incarceration in more restricted conditions contributes to poorer mental health, I don't think there's a great deal of evidence to support that. Where there have been studies done, even on, say, 60-day segregation orders or something like that, there has been no deterioration in the mental health status of inmates on those kind of orders. Longer term, I think the jury's still out.
The sanitised environment can make Supermax look more like a clinic than a prison. although the Nagel Royal Commission had recommended the opposite course of dispersing rather than concentrating serious offenders, New South Wales Corrective Services believes it's learned the lessons of history.
It is a brutal environment. Do you think it is possible to manage to conduct the job in a way that is always above reproach?
Well, I think, even if you walk through the Supermax, you wouldn't call it, you don't get the sense that it's brutal. There's some brutal people there, and when you look at their offences and that they've committed, it's shocking. But you can walk through an institution such as the Supermax jail, you don't get the feeling that it's brutal. You get the feeling, in a way, that it's peaceful. And so if it can be peaceful there, it can be peaceful in the rest of the system.
Very little evidence of violence, of self-harm. It's a very quiet and even peaceful place. Is no escapes. Is this an indicator of success?
Of efficiency? It could be an indication of efficiency, but not necessarily effectiveness.
The Supermax, half full at this stage, has a further facility which anticipates even tougher times to come.
I know a lot of people, a lot of Kooris in particular, have seen Allah, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. They've been hanging out with the Lebanese, and maybe their faith's touched them. I don't know.
We see some efforts to convert inmates to Islam for probably the wrong reasons. We haven't really have evidence for terrorist purposes in itself, but when it's for the wrong reason and when it's targeting violent people, it is a concern.
What do you do to restrain the growth of terrorist gangs then?
Well, our intelligence is very good, and we've put a lot of money into making sure that our intelligence gathering process is excellent, and we work in conjunction with other law enforcement agencies with the swapping of intelligence. And some of these people convert, in their mind they convert and then they convert back. But we're worried where certain prisoners that are doing very long sentences, as an example, denounce their Aboriginality for Islam, and we've got photographs of them before and after. We monitor them very closely, and to us, they're not terrorists in the real sense, but they talk the talk. And so if we had somebody who was recruiting in a prison, we keep them away from people that might be susceptible to conversion.
Meanwhile, the yards fill up even more. Indigenous Australians, 2% of the population, make up 21% of the prison population. A newer trend is the increasing presence of female Aboriginal inmates.
When you look at what's caused their offending behaviour, if a woman has been abused for years as a child and as an adult and can get to a situation where they make a decision that they're going to hit back and they stab somebody or kill somebody that's been perpetrating that abuse on them for years, in a way you can understand why they do it. And of course you feel sorry for them.
The eternal query that has stalked the corridors of Australian jails, are they bad or mad, is becoming easier to answer. Over 1/3 of sentenced inmates have suffered mental disorders. The psychiatric beds lost when deinstitutionalisation occurred account for many of the increased numbers jammed into penitentiaries. On this subject of mental health in prisons, even mortal enemies agree.
There's no facilities, and these people really don't belong in jail. And this jail is a violent place. People, because they're, how can I say it, easy targets, they can't defend themselves, there's no real great resistance. You've got people in there, that would attack they're out of boredom, you know what I mean, really, would attack people or give them a hard time. You know, these people don't need to be there, really they don't.
So does prison make their condition better or worse?
In some cases it keeps them alive. And because you can monitor them very closely for the medication they require to assist them with their illness. And in my 40 years in the job, I've never seen the damaged product like it is now that's coming off the street. It's unbelievable. In our big remand jails, particularly of a Friday night, it's like a casualty ward. We carry them off the vans, help them off the vans. They're an absolute mess, and the first thing we do now is address their medical issues.
And then Pure Chrissy is going to the toilet.
On the good side, prison staff have moved a long way since the dark days of the Bathurst riots.
There have always been good women and good men in the service of the department. I've always known them. But it looks as if the training and other influences that have been brought to bear are producing, in the minds perhaps of a new generation of prison officers, a different view.
We have the bashings in 70 and 74 at Bathurst. We have the systematic bashings at Grafton over a 33-year period, organised and approved by the department, and indeed with the knowledge of a whole range of other participants, including people within government. And we still have some of the same prison officers there in the department, sometimes, in some cases at reasonably high levels within the department, who actually took part in those bashings. And yet we've seen that culture of systematic violence really brought to an end by the Nagel inquiry, and so that is a huge culture change.
Those new skills and attitudes acquired over the last generation will be seriously tested. While conditions have improved since the 1970s, the concentration of drugs, gangs and mental illness has made the jail environment more toxic and the modern prisoner more predatory.
So what's your sense at the end of the day? Does the average prisoner get out better or worse?
I don't know. I think that the opportunity is there for every prisoner to be released much better for the experience. The exact number that take that up, there is a lot of them, but at the harder end of the scale, those doing longer periods, I think there's less.
While the prison system has tightened its grip, it has done so on a time bomb. Australian jails have become the outer casing for not just the mad and bad, but dangerous cement-them-in public policy.
It's become a sort of auction. I was the one who introduced that term. I can be tougher than you. No, you're not. We'll be tougher than you. And you finish up, in a sense, camouflaging so many other shortcomings in government administration by offering people at least one thing that they want and they feel better for. That is having a lot of people in jail.
Having a tough policy on law and order and putting more and more people in jail is seen as being politically popular, however kind of irrational, foolish, counterproductive it might be. In real terms, that just doesn't seem to matter.
The toughness is easy to see, but jails are also fragile. The anger and pain is eventually released. The fatal arithmetic is most prisoners, even the worst of them, get out. And if we are worse for it, who is more to blame? Those who keep them here or those who put them here?